everybody, and welcome back to Ask the Unfaithful. I'm Sam. I'm so thankful that you've joined us today. I'm joined by my great friend and brilliant clinician, James Anir. So, James, you guys are on hurricane watch. How are you holding up?
Doing great, actually. Sadly for the people in Tampa, it looks like it's coming their way and not so much ours, and feel so sad for them because they've just been through that over there. So prayers their way.
Yes, our thoughts, our prayers. We're thinking about all of you in Florida, from Tampa to St. Pete. I have friends and colleagues and clients all over Florida. So our thoughts are with you. We hope you're safe. We'll be praying and thinking about you. Today, we're going to talk about something that can be a sensitive topic, but is something that has to be talked about because we unfaithful can harm and hurt and even wound our betrayed with our communication styles. Today, James and I are going to discuss 4 hurtful communication styles of the unfaithful. So, James, why is it so important the way we communicate in a relationship affected by infidelity or addiction?
It's going to hurt or harm or wound our partners more if we do it poorly. If we do it well, it can actually build trust and help establish a new relationship, right? A new way of relating, because these patterns have been there for a long time. So it's really important. How we communicate matters, and the effects of knowing the effects of our bad communication or poor communication styles matters. You know, we communicate badly. We get defensive. Why we do it, where we get angry at ourselves, but we were directed outward, frustrated that we can't seem to get it right. We just want the whole thing to go away and stop having to deal with our partner's pain. And of course, shame. And that goes into the defense, right? Just kind of like, I'm going to block that feeling of shame.
Now, these things are so important because you alluded to it. Now, when we have these, we're talking about 4 today, these communication styles, how does this affect the betrayed?
So betrayed in general, right? I'm gonna talk about with each one of these how it specifically does, but feeling attacked, feeling betrayed again, being re-traumatized, feeling unloved, unseen, unheard, disrespected. You can add a lot to that list, but that
Mm.
kind of encapsulates it.
You're right. We could put a whole Webster's dictionary of all of the ways that our hurtful communication wounds and just pushes away trust, pushes away safety, and really just prolongs the entire recovery process. And having good communication isn't a cure-all, but it sure as heck one of the most effective ways to make recovery easier. So we're going to jump into these 4 styles. I have the privilege of having the notes beforehand. So the first one is aggressive. Now, what qualifies as aggressive communication that hurts?
Aggressive communication is about winning, right? And most often at our betrayed's expense. So we're acting as unfaithfuls as if we're right, always right, that our needs are most important. And as though we, in fact, have more rights than our partners, and what we have to say is more consequential than our partners. And so that's kind of the definition, or what aggressive communication is about. And it has these behavioral characteristics. So we're going to kind of go through these on each one, right? These sort of
Right.
categories. But the behavioral characteristics are threatening, hostile, demanding, explosive, unpredictable, intimidating, essentially bullying. And that aggressive style does not allow for any kind of back and forth whatsoever. The way it comes across, or how it's seen kind of in somebody's, so we're going to talk about body language, right? So I'll say voice because I'm going to include that. As far as volume, voice is typically loud. The
Yeah.
body language is kind of a puffing up in your space, right? In your personal space, leaning over you. Gestures are big and fast. Faces scowling and glaring and angry and contemptuous. And so when you see that kind of body language, it's frightening. Then the words, right? What's the language that you're going to hear? It's going to be accusatory. It's going to be labeling. You are blank. So you're crazy. I'm right, you're wrong, you're impossible. I'm not going to do this anymore.
Right.
I'm going to live like this forever? Look what you're doing to me. Right? So it's it's heavy, man, and it's like an attack. It just comes at you like a minigun. Sarcastic, it's blaming, it's threatening, it's insulting, it's belligerent.
It's funny, the unfaithful, I mean, they're delaying the whole process. They're harming themselves. The unfaithful, they're resentful and defensive, they're unreachable, uncoachable, and they're just tantruming. But how does that make the betrayed feel?
Hurt, afraid, humiliated, degraded. It's like, so I think in unfaithful, what's helpful is to think of it. Do I really want my partner to be afraid of me? Do I want my partner to fear me? And it's just so that I can dominate and not have this thing come up anymore. Who wants that? That's not a relationship where the other's living in fear of saying anything or bringing anything up or talking about how they feel. And it's going to lead to, in the long term, right? Not short term, it'll be short term too, but long term, which means basically we're not going to grow our relationship. It's going to add to the last loss of trust, which is already gone because of the betrayal and the discovery. And there's going to be this lasting loss of respect by the partner to the unfaithful. That's very hard to rebuild those two. An aggressive communication style is going to undercut any kind of rebuilding you have going on there. Moreover, the betrayed partner is going to shut down. They're going to withdraw, basically out of fear that the aggressive communicator is going to explode or steamroll or humiliate them. And nobody wants to live with that, so why would they put themselves out there at all? They're going to back off of that, and then you really don't have a real relationship at that point.
No, you just have one big fight. Everybody's angry at each other, and you just keep circling the drain and wondering why we're not getting any better. And then if you hire the wrong person, then that third party comes in, and all you're doing is continuing the same thing with the third party witness. Number two, and I thought this one was brilliant, you used the word submissive, but also passive. I think there's many betrayeds out there, male or female, that absolutely just are feel like they are being gutted by a hurtful, passive communication style. What does this look like, sound like?
So in some ways, this is the opposite of the aggressive, right? And certainly appears to be. The problem is that it ends up being a bit aggressive in its own way. It is not passive aggressive. We're going to talk about that later. But the submissive is about, so there's this people pleasing or this, I'm going to please you. In order to avoid conflict. You end up avoiding everything though. So the unfaithful might appear to be overly contrite, even annoyingly so, right? Like, oh my God, will you just please
Yeah.
have a
Mm-hmm.
conversation with me? In this, the betrayed's always made out to be right. The unfaithful likes to take all of the blame for everything all throughout life, right? Even the household stuff. I'm sorry, I didn't do that, or yeah, that's not, I didn't repair that, or whatever. It comes
Yeah.
in all these different ways. It also is putting the betrayed up on a pedestal, which means they're way up there and we're down here, which means there's really not a relationship going on. And it really comes out of shame, our own shame. So the shame that we cause the betrayed's pain, it's also coming out of this place where we want to avoid feeling our own pain over owning that or feeling our own shame from our pain, right? So we want to avoid the discussion, which we'll often see as difficult and scary. But above all, it's highly divisive, right? This is not connective at all.
Now, what does this look like? Like you're describing it, but what are some signs that I'm sure the betrayed are probably going to be like, ooh, yes, when he or she does that. But what are some characteristics of the passive or submissive?
So overly apologetic, but it feels a bit disingenuous because it's just too much, right? All confrontation is avoided at all costs. Here's a biggie: we won't make a decision. So we put all decisions onto the betrayed, right? Can even come down to, oh, what do you want for dinner? Well, you decide.
Right.
Blaming, so woe is me kind of stuff. Any compliments coming submissive person's way, usually deflected, or no, that's not me, right? We don't collaborate when we're in this space. Withholding, not expressing emotions or desires, and passive acceptance. So that really means I'm yielding, over yielding usually, while I'm discounting myself, right? But because of that, I'm going to resent.
Mm-hmm.
The way to look at that is, okay, you make the decision, but then I get to resent the decision that you've made if I don't like it.
Right.
We become
Mm.
kind of martyr-like, right? Oh, I'm going to prostrate myself and you know, here I am. I'm being the great person, giving it all up, resisting any kind of new possibilities, even if they might be helpful for the relationship, and then going with that, not at all proactive.
Because it's just so disingenuous. It's just so inauthentic. And the betrayed sometimes just sits back and goes, something this just doesn't feel right. So now what does it look like?
So voice volume is going to be soft or low. I used to be called a mumbly peg, right? Because
Mm.
that's how low my voice would go, and that's really a shame response. It's almost unhearable. My posture's going to be a little slumped. My head will hang, maybe some puppy eyes, surely no contact, and I might fidget with my fingers, or I might bounce a leg or something like that. Or what I'm going to say verbally is, yeah, you're right, you're absolutely right. Now, can we anything you choose is okay with me. You know best. I'm doing the best that I can, which doesn't come across real well.
No, it frustrates the hell out of the betrayed, male or female, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exasperating and exhausting, frankly. And then there may even be guilt in there. Like I'm always making the decisions. I'm always, and there may be some guilt in that. But frustration, exasperation, exhaustion, those are the biggies. The long-term effects on the relationship, the trades can end up making the decisions, and then guess what? The unfaithful thinks of them as controlling. They're not. We have abdicated control, and they have to pick up the reins because we don't give them a choice. It's not controlling. It's just that things wouldn't get done if they didn't then, pick up the reins and move with it. So the trades can end up resentful because then they're forced to be responsible for us and are resented for it. So that can generate resentment in them. And they can end up seeing their unfaithfuls as weak and think it's not worth bothering to try to engage in collaboration.
One of the quickest ways to start to rebuild some semblance of hope in the mind and in the heart of the betrayed is for us unfaithful to be intentional and to be able to show leadership. Not that we're going to be in charge of recovery, but that we lead ourselves, that we'll do our own work, that we'll make it intentional and not be so passive and take such a step back, because then the betrayed feels like they're babysitting us, which if you want to make a betrayed just feel massive anger, is put it on them to take care of you and to lead everything and to do everything. I promise you it will backfire if you're an unfaithful. It's one of the worst things that you can do. Now, the next one's really tricky, and that one is being passive aggressive. Now, passive aggressive, we know, is hurtful, and it's wounding. But why is it so hurtful from an unfaithful?
Because for a betrayed, it's hard to know kind of what's going on. It's not always obvious. And yet you feel like, what just happened here? I've, I just expressed myself and now I'm wrong for it somehow. It's not an obvious thing. It's an indirect aggression, and it's insidious, and frankly, it's cruel.
Beautifully said. I love that. Indirect aggression and it's just cruel. So keep going, but I just wanted to, that is so brilliantly said. So carry on.
So basically, passive aggression is where we unfaithful can appear passive and act agreeably, but we're actually acting out our anger in indirect or kind of behind the scenes ways. And it most often happens because we feel like we've kind of lost our power and control, which in a sense we have, as we can't get out of what we've done, right? It's been discovered, it's obvious, and we can't get out of the pain that we've caused. And we often feel that the consequences for that, for our behaviors and what they've done, is intrusive and against the life that we're used to, that we're frankly entitled to, is how we think about it. And so that's why we're mad, because we've lost the control, even though it's our fault.
Yep.
We've lost any power and control, but then we're of course pointing that outward at our partner. So we end up feeling actually like we have lack of no control or lack of control over our lives. And we're angry at who we're projecting that blame from themselves onto, which is our betrayed. And we're resentful about it. And we're going to express, if we're passive aggressive, going to express our feelings subtly, or what we think is subtly anyway, undermining our betrayeds.
And it's really quite devious, right? Just the way that we carry ourselves in that process.
It's devious. There's sarcasm so often. We're unreliable, resentful of following through. We sour situations. We sulk. We get patronizing. Frankly, it really looks very two-faced, right? So kind of that, when we look at it outside of the betrayed and unfaithful relationship, it's like talking behind other people's backs. Nice to their face, talk behind their back. So
Right.
it's got those elements to it within the relationship, although it can be sort of like, oh yeah, okay, uh-huh, yeah, that kind of thing, and yet we're talking bad about them, or we're doing things that undermine them. This is a very active act to harm our betrayeds by undermining them or talking badly about them. We might even say, our voice might be that sugary sweet, very disingenuous, but sugar, oh, it's okay, but our posture is going to be one of contempt. This is actually very interesting. I'm going to take my glasses off to do this, but I'm going to really exaggerate it here. But, see how it's kind of one-sided? It might just be one,
Hmm.
one eye, slight curl to the lip on like that, right? Certainly their body is going to be somewhat asymmetrical, right? One shoulder might be up, or it might be one hip cocked, something like that. Sometimes the face can be disguised, so you might have to look for it in the body, but you'll see that twitch real quick.
Yeah.
They'll also invade the passive aggressive body language as they're invading your space. Maybe touch a lot. It seems gentle, and it's not. It's actually I'm in charge. I'm in charge. I'm in charge. Pretending to be warm and loving.
That's what I think is one of the most harmful things, is the pretending, right? They are pretending to be X, Y, and Z, and then their actions behind the scenes can seem so retaliatory, just outright demeaning.
Yeah.
And then the betrayed is kind of like so confused, like it's really so tormenting to the betrayed to have to live that way. But what's some of the language that comes along with it? Because the language is extremely hurtful as well.
Well, you're always right and I'm always wrong, which then sounds like pity me, and so it pings the betrayed's empathy, right?
Absolutely.
I'll take care of it myself. I usually have to anyway. Another example, I wouldn't expect you to understand my point of view anyway. Oh, I wish we could just have a good time, honey, but I know you don't like to go out because there might be women at the restaurant.
Right.
You're too sensitive. I'm sorry I can't be perfect. I'm sorry you feel that way. What do you mean? I didn't blank, or I wasn't blank. Nobody sees the good I'm doing. You decide everything anyway. You know? So all of those, they seem kind of obvious, but in the moment they're not that obvious. Now, a passive aggressive person can get so used to this that they're not necessarily aware that they're doing it. And I'm just going to
Mm.
give this hint. If you feel some anger inside, you're probably doing it.
Yeah. Because it can become massively confusing to the betrayed, right? Because they're trying to match the behavior with words, they're trying to make sense of it, and it's really, I don't know if confusion is the right word, disillusioning, disorienting, but it's just such a feeling of confusion in the mind of the betrayed, right?
Confusion, if so, betrayeds, if you feel frustrated, but you kind of know you're being messed with on some level, then it's passive aggression. If you're angry, hurt, resentful, you can't quite point out or argue it with the passive aggressive communicator because they can so easily deny what they're doing and their intent behind what they're doing. That's a biggie. If you can't, if you're like, but you can't argue it because you can't quite pinpoint it, but also I'm going to argue, but you're doing that on purpose. No, I'm not. What are you talking about? So it's so easily deniable. If a betrayed feels mocked or trapped, that's also a big indicator.
Now, all of that is so painful, but the long-term effects of that type of passive aggressive behavior, doesn't it come back to really bite the unfaithful in the butt, literally?
Yeah, well, literally, yeah, because it's really cutting off your nose to spite your face, as the old saying goes, right?
Right.
What we end up doing as unfaithful for passive aggressives, we end up sabotaging ourselves, our own recovery, and our relational recovery. And that's partly because the betrayed are going to catch on to this pretty quick, and they're going to know overall in the long term, there's all that trust, all trust and respect is going to be lost and almost impossible to rebuild. It makes conflicts even worse, and it erodes both the betrayed self-esteem and the unfaithful self-esteem.
And it just completely undermines what we're trying to do. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just plain and simple. If you're an unfaithful, and if you can identify with one or all three of these, it is time for you to take inventory. It's time for you to do your own intervention on yourself. Now, the fourth one is really when you and I said the words insidious earlier, this is insidious, and that's the manipulative style of communication, which is incredibly hurtful to the betrayed. What does that look like so
So
we have some clarity to it?
okay, so manipulative can actually be all the other three, but used to manipulate, right? So manipulative communication is cunning, it's calculating, and it's shrewd. Unfaithfuls who communicate this way have hidden messages and many things that they say that are designed to control or influence their betrayed. So behavioral characteristics here would be scheming, insidiously controlling. So, for example, by souring or sulking, it's rarely direct. It's typically very indirect. It often uses the poor me approach to make others feel sorry for them or want to help them. So it plays on that empathy. Crocodile tears, patronizing, jealousy is one here. So that's a real indicator of manipulative communication is jealousy. Ingratiating. So ingratiating would mean, I'm going to right, I'm going to make myself out to be great. I'm going to do everything kind of that I anticipate you want or might need, but I'm not genuine about it. So I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
ingratiate myself to you or on you, and that is going to be a way to manipulate you. It isn't because I'm genuine about it.
Right. Now, there's some nonverbal aspects to manipulation as well, right?
There are. So we talk about the voice in each one, right? So a lot of times it's going to be higher pitched. So, if normally I say, hey, I'm Johnny Cash, I'm going to go, hey, I'm Johnny Cash, right?
Right.
It's going to be a lot. It might not be that amplified, but it's going to be a lot. I say Johnny because he's back there. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, there's going to be this chameleonic kind of face and posture, right? So it's whatever I use to get what I need. So if it's shaming, if it's puppy dog eyes, if it's
Yeah.
sort of more of a power, if it's more stand up and in your face, I'm changing that as I need to get what I want. And it may change in the moment. So if the puppy dog eyes isn't working, I might go, and kind of get in your face.
And this is where, as we talk about the language of it to me, I find to be some of the most hurtful aspects of it, because the language of it really makes an attempt to manipulate, wound, or just violate the safety of the betrayed. So, what does it sound like language wise?
So some examples might be, if you really wanted us to get better, you wouldn't keep bringing this back up.
Right.
I mean, okay, let me put you back on your heels so you don't want to talk about this anymore. You don't want to express your pain. And that manipulation is about, I don't want to hear it anymore because I can't tolerate my own stuff with it. So
Mm-hmm.
quit, right? You've acted like this since before I cheated on you. So it's got to be something else. So, okay. So what that's doing is it's saying, oh, were you ever angry at all before the discovery? Well, of course, you're human, but then that gets manipulated. So see, you were always like this. This isn't about that. You should really consider how much your reactions are damaging our recovery.
Absolutely. And one of the also the classic lines of, you're the one that's keeping us stuck. If you would just stop talking about it, if you would just stop flooding, if you would just stop being a human being, basically reacting to life altering trauma, then we could just move on and ride off into the sunset. But it's so damaging. It is so, it just brings about such incredible hurt, pain, and would you even say that it adds to the trauma that they're feeling with the manipulation, because they can't always put their finger on it, right?
Right. Yeah, it absolutely does. Because what did we unfaithful do all the time that we were being unfaithful before we were discovered? We manipulated. So it's going to feel exactly the same and hit that trauma button immediately, and then our
Yeah.
betrayeds are going to spin into their trauma spiral. They're going to have a hard time getting out of that because the manipulation keeps going. It keeps happening. It's re-traumatizing. That's a big thing. Make no mistake about that. Every time we do it, it re-traumatizes our betrayeds and takes them back to the same level as discovery, as everything else they felt before discovery, and every bit of denial there's been since. So, things like, oh, you're hurting me, you're shaming me. That's a manipulation, and that's going to recreate the whole mirage that we did before. And for betrayed to be able to put their finger on it may be difficult, like with the passive aggressive, but they're going to know they're being manipulated because they've seen it so much. They're going to get frustrated, seriously frustrated, because they're working so hard on dealing with something that they didn't
Yeah.
cause. And that is hard work to deal with trauma. And the frustration can come because we continue to do the same thing. Now, for those who are actually working their recovery, this may still occur, but it's going to get less and less because we become aware of all of these types of communication, right? So what you might see in a betrayed is getting more irritated, annoyed, angry, resentful, that they're constantly trying to figure out what is going on. They don't
Yeah.
know where they stand, really have no idea where they stand with their unfaithful, because it seems to be the same stuff. Yet, if there are these other ones going on, like the submissive or passive, oh well, wait a minute, but it sounds like he's really or she's really trying to do what's right here. It's very difficult with all of these types of communication for a betrayed to get any kind of ground under them where they feel like there's repair going on.
Because the long-term effects are diabolical, right?
Yeah, the long-term effects can be, they completely undermines trust. Trust seems to be a problem with all of these, right? Yes, absolutely. In manipulation, there's absolutely no relational recovery or individual recovery for that matter, because both are based in honesty and trust. A betrayed can, if they're manipulated, they may be manipulated into feeling guilty and end up doing exactly what the manipulator wants, even apologizing for what the manipulator is convincing them they've done. that kind of undermining, it just undermines everything. So that relational recovery just isn't going to happen if this is going on.
No, it's kind of like, for those that watch the UFC, when you do a sweep the leg kick and you kick somebody's legs right out from underneath them, I mean, you effectively render them almost powerless, or you put them on the ground and now they're just struggling to try and have any kind of fight in them. That's how I see these communication styles, especially when you put all four of them together. It just sweeps the legs right out from underneath the betrayed, and they're trying to make sense of it. They're trying to find some footing, and as soon as they get some footing, now it's maybe passive aggressive, or now it's, submissive or passive in general. Maybe it's just outright manipulative, but they're trying to get their feet underneath them. And if they can't, there's a point where I think all of us, I know that you did this. I know that I had to do it. It was usually for me, I was confronted with it and had to go, I'm really wounding my partner by this behavior. And nobody can stop this but me, right? I mean, they can call it out, but we have to be the ones that have an honest, heart to heart, confrontational moment with ourselves in our communication. Do you agree?
I agree. And I think a big thing there is, and we're not going to rely, we shouldn't rely on our betrayeds to point it out, but when they do, listen, sit with that, and go, am I being passive aggressive? Am I being manipulative? Uh, do I need to be more proactive, i.e. not be submissive? Am I being aggressive? Look at those things that you're being told and really examine them. Because frankly, if you do want this relationship to heal, all four of these are something that we cannot afford to do. So we have to learn when we're doing them, which isn't always obvious if we've done them for a long, long time. Okay, so it's on us to figure out when it's happening. And by golly, if somebody's telling us, we really need to listen to that. If we hear those words, listen.
especially especially our betrayed partner who we're trying to rebuild trust with and trying to save the relationship. So maybe we should try and listen. Now, next time we're going to talk about what we have called healthy collaborative communication styles, right? We've outlined probably four of the most hurtful and wounding. But next time we're going to talk about healthy and collaborative, to give the unfaithful and the betrayed a, a bit of a compare and contrast of, here's how you actually show empathy and kindness and respect and win back trust. Give the audience a little bit of a teaser for next time, because I'm sure that anybody unfaithful or betrayed listening and watching this is probably going to be like, whoa, this is eye-opening. So what do we do now, right? What's a better way? So what's a little teaser on what healthy collaborative communication looks like after infidelity or addiction?
It really has to be one where you're present, where you're listening, where you're empathetic, which everybody goes, oh, empathy. Okay,
Yeah.
compassionate then, right? Compassion means with. Calm means with the other person, there's passion. So compassion means I'm going to feel, I'm going to really feel you. I'm going to be here with you in this, right? That's compassion. And so we're going to work on that. So that this isn't the whole answer in this little
Not
bit.
at all.
We're going to really lay it out there, right? And that's some hints as to what's coming up.
James, I love today. I feel like today is a bit of maybe a yardstick to look at and go, am I doing these things? So if they're guilty of one or all of them, maybe some have been like, I feel really bad because I think I've done all four of them. What's one thing the unfaithful can do to make significant change in their life?
Well, talk to your betrayed about it. So you know what? I listened to Ask the Unfaithful, and I looked at that, right? And I saw that I really do communicate in these ways, whether it's all four or one, and own it and say, I don't want to do that anymore. That's not fair to you, and it's not fair to us. So I want to work on that, and I'm gonna make a plan to do that. So I think just actually bringing it to the fore is really important, because if you hold back on it and just try to change it, how's your betrayed really going to know as you work to change it? So that's a really important piece, is to communicate what it is
I
that you're
love that.
changing.
I love that. And I think that's the epitome of collaborating with your partner, being able to say, hey, call me out on it, maybe graciously, but call me out on it. Have a heart to say, hey, that feels like this, or that feels like that. On behalf of James and I, thank you so much for joining us. We'd love for you to leave a comment and follow us, and we will see you next time on Ask the Unfaithful.